All right, so I was out. I don't know how many of you guys were out there. It was a very, very moving ceremony out on the beach in Santa Barbara by Young America's Foundation, which runs the Reagan Ranch Center. And I gave a few remarks, which was very difficult because before I gave these remarks, they had bagpipe playing, which was just absolutely heartbreaking. I was afraid I was just going to get up and sob for 5 minutes, but I managed to push through. And I was talking about some of the things that we wanted to remember about 9/11 because we're hearing a lot of things from people like we shouldn't talk about it. And Slate, a college professor today, said we don't need to memorialize 9/11. These students have enough on their minds without sitting around just worrying about things that happened before their lifetime. Joe Scarborough today wrote an article in the Washington Post. I'll just read you the headline: Trump is damaging the dream of America more than any terrorist attack ever could. So you can tell that people on the left are sort of seizing this moment to sink as low as they possibly can and kind of making this an unimportant day. But it's not. It's not an unimportant day, and remembering things is not unimportant. I was thinking as I was speaking this morning about Lincoln's first inaugural address. When, you know, there can be many arguments about who was the greatest American president, but there can be no argument about who was the greatest writer who was American president. It was Abraham Lincoln. And in his first inaugural address, he was begging the South not to pull away from America, not to start a civil war. And at the end, he said, "We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature." Just such beautiful language, the mystic chords being played by our better angels. Well, the mystic chords of memory are in fact very mysterious. I mean, memory is what makes us who we are. It's how we know that we're the same person we were yesterday. It's how we build a picture of our personality from the moment we're born until the day we die. And I think it is true not just of individuals, it's true of our nation. And that's why I think it's so important. Guys like this professor writing in Slate saying we shouldn't remember things. I travel around with YAF to different colleges, and I find a lot of kids are being taught nothing. They're being taught nothing about how our government works, about where it comes from, about why we think the things we do, why we believe the things we do. And, you know, they're also being told histories that emphasize the worst things about this country. I mean, the bad things that happened in this country, as they have in all country. And I always tell them that is as if I told your biography starting with your porn searches online. You know, that's, you know, you say, who is Bob? Well, let me tell you this, because this will really grab you. And by the time I'm finished, you think he's a horrible person when he really is. It's really not the bad things that we all do. It's the good things we do in this country has transformed the world for the better. There's not a single person politically free walking on the earth who does not owe a debt of gratitude to America. I mean, that is just a mathematical fact. We have really freed the world and taught the world what freedom means. All these people making speeches in Europe about how they're multicultural countries, which they're not, got that from us. I mean, they are imitating us. Even the Soviet Union, a slave state, felt compelled to call themselves the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics because everybody knew that we had gotten it right, except us, because we were admiring the USSR. We were saying, oh yes, that's wonderful. So these memories remind us who we are. And I want to talk a little bit about my own memories of 9/11 and three things I learned from 9/11. And you may be surprised to hear that some of these are a little politically incorrect. But when 9/11 happened, I had only been back in this country a year. I had left to go to England for a year and had stayed for 7 years. So I was an expatriate. And I had this tremendous experience living overseas for 7 years, a long time, which was kind of like when the astronauts went to the moon and they took that picture of Earth and they saw it at a distance. And so for 6.5 of the 7 years, all I paid attention to was English politics. That's all I knew. I knew English people, read English news, was involved in English politics. The Bill Clinton scandals were going on. And of course, that was part of the English news, so I knew about it, but I wasn't in the country for any of that. And when I came back and I moved here to Santa Barbara, I found that my opinions had changed, And as a guy who had grown up in a liberal Democrat family where there were Republicans and then there were Nazis. And the separation was like this, that was really the way. If a Republican got elected president, my father was packing gold bars into a suitcase so he could bribe his way through the border to Canada. And so I came back, and to my shock, I found that the people who were saying what I was saying in America were Rush Limbaugh, the guys at the corner in National Review. Nazis, these evil conservatives, were saying what I thought had learned to be true about America from seeing it from very far away. And then I was here 1 year, I guess, and 9/11 happened. And I remember waking up, and you have to understand that my entire family lives on the island of Manhattan. Now, one of them has moved to the Bronx, but they all are New Yorkers, and they've all lived in Manhattan all their lives. And so I wake up 3,000 miles away, and I hear that a plane has gone into the World Trade Center. And the first thing I thought of was I remembered reading that in 1945, a military plane had crashed accidentally into the Empire State Building. And so that was the picture in my mind when I turned on the TV and saw what had really happened. And of course, I started calling my family, and one by one, I had 3 brothers and my father and mother. And I remember my father, who's now gone, but at the time he was sobbing. And I will tell you that the one thing you never want to hear in this life is your father sobbing. You do not want to hear that sound. And I remember, he thought, this is war. We're now at war. And I remember saying to him, it's not going to be a big war like World War II. It's going to be a lot of little wars because there's no nation to fight. We're fighting this philosophy. We're fighting a philosophy. And that was the first lesson. That was the first lesson I remember, is that we're fighting a philosophy. And so much of human life is about philosophy. So much of history is about ideas, a battle over ideas. And that was why it was my last stage in becoming an actual open conservative. I was already a conservative, but this was my last stage in acknowledging it, because I saw liberals asking the question. I remember David Letterman going on TV after this happened and asking the question, why do they hate us? Now, I've volunteered on a lot of suicide hotlines, on a couple of suicide hotlines. And every now and again, you speak to a wife whose husband is violent and who hits her. And a lot of times, the woman will say to you, what am I doing wrong? What can I do to stop him from hitting me? And of course, I wasn't allowed to say it. My answer was, shoot him, that'll stop him, So like, when I heard David Letterman say, why do they hate us? My first reaction was, well, let's kill him and see if that solves the problem. That would be the fastest thing to do, because they're not acting because of us. That's demeaning to our enemies. It's demeaning to our enemies to think that we have some power to make them change their minds. We don't. They are grown-up adults just like us, and they're acting on their ideas as we are acting on our ideas. And that is why when I was working in the movie business at the time and selling a lot of scripts, I write mysteries and ghost stories. But that's why when I saw Hollywood start to turn out these films in which our soldiers were depicted as rapists and killers and idiots who were being abused by evil Republicans and sent into war where they were risking their lives for nothing, that's why I became an outspoken conservative, effectively ending my Hollywood career, because I realized our culture is where we store these ideas that are lived ideas, our movies. Not only did I think it was wrong to make anti-American films while our guys were at war, which was the real reason that made me so angry I started speaking out, but also this is the way these films last forever. These films last forever. They're on at 3 o'clock in the morning, and this is the way young people will remember these things. And that's why I was so glad when American Sniper came out and told an honest version of the story. Not that we were perfect. This is not about the fact that we're better people than they are. It's the fact that bad ideas make cultures bad. Bad ideas make people do horrible things. And good ideas ennoble people and lift them up.